the forgotten gods of Elden Ring. You know their names, but do you truly know their stories? The Greater Will, the Frenzied Flame, the Formless Mother. These are the powers that shape the lands between, yet most players rush through the game without understanding the cosmic horror that lurks beneath every blessing, every curse, every moment of grace. What if I told you that the entire world of Elden Ring is nothing more than a battlefield where ancient gods wage war through mortal pawns? That every character you meet, every boss you face, every ending you choose is just another move in a game that began long before the Erd Tree ever took root? Most players think they understand Elden Ring's story. They see Marika, they see the demigods, they see the shattering. But that's just the surface. The real story, the one that From Software buried in item descriptions and environmental storytelling, is about beings so alien and powerful that even their whispers can drive entire civilizations to madness. In this video, I'm going to take you beyond the veil of the lands between. We're going to explore the outer gods, those cosmic entities that exist beyond time and space, pulling the strings of fate itself. You'll discover why the Greater Will isn't the benevolent force you thought it was, how the Frenzied Flame represents something far more terrifying than mere chaos, and why the other forgotten gods might be the key to understanding what Elden Ring is really about. I've spent months diving deep into the lore, connecting fragments scattered across dozens of items, piecing together references that most players never notice. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about this world. And by the end of this series, you'll never look at the lands between the same way again. But first, we need to understand what an outer god actually is. The term appears scattered throughout the game, whispered in incantations, carved into ancient weapons, embedded in the very fabric of reality. These aren't gods in the traditional sense. They're not beings you can fight or bargain with. They're fundamental forces of existence, concepts given consciousness, ideas that have grown so powerful they've transcended the need for physical form. Think of them as living philosophies. The Greater Will represents order, structure, the need for everything to have its place. The Frenzied Flame embodies chaos, the desire to burn away all distinction and return everything to primordial unity. The Formless Mother feeds on blood and wounds, finding divinity in suffering itself. But here's where it gets interesting. These gods don't interact with the world directly. They can't. They exist on a plane so far removed from physical reality that their very presence would unmake the world they're trying to influence. Instead, they work through agents, through vessels, through the slow corruption of mortal minds. The Greater Will sends its golden star crashing into the lands between, carrying with it the Elden Beast, a living embodiment of its will. It speaks through the two fingers, those writhing appendages that crown the divine towers. It grants grace to chosen mortals, guiding them toward actions that serve its grand design. The Frenzied Flame whispers through the three fingers hidden beneath the capital, spreading madness to those who venture too close. It promises an end to all suffering through the simple expedient of ending all existence. No more pain, no more loss, no more struggle. Just the warm embrace of yellow flame consuming everything that ever was or could be. The Formless Mother reaches into the world through blood, through violence, through the primal act of wounding. She grants power to those who understand that pain is the only honest emotion, that suffering is the truest form of worship. Mog serves her not despite his cursed blood, but because of it. And these are just the ones we know about, the ones that play an active role in the story. But if you look deeper, if you pay attention to the subtle references scattered throughout the game, you'll find hints of other powers, other influences, other gods whose names have been all but forgotten. There's the god of the ancient dragons, the one who fled before the Erd tree's rise, leaving Placidus Axe to wait eternally for a return that will never come. There's the god of the crucible, that primordial force that blended all life together before the greater will imposed its rigid order. There's the god of the death birds, those spectral creatures that once guided souls to their final rest before Marika removed death from the world. Each of these represents a different aspect of existence, a different way of understanding reality, and each has been suppressed, forgotten, or actively destroyed by the greater will's inexorable march toward total dominion. But why should you care about ancient history? Because the past isn't past in Elden Ring. It's alive, writhing beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reassert itself. Every curse that plagues the lands between is a remnant of these forgotten powers. Every blessing carries the seed of something older and stranger than the Golden Order would have you believe. The scarlet rot isn't just a disease. It's the dying breath of a god of decay, a force that exists to break down the artificial barriers the greater will has erected. The death root spreading through the world isn't corruption. It's the natural order reasserting itself. Death reclaiming its rightful place in the cycle of existence. Even the dung-eater, that most reviled of characters, serves a purpose in this cosmic struggle. His obsession with curses, his desire to defile the very concept of rebirth, represents a rejection of the greater will's sanitized version of existence. He's not evil for evil's sake. He's a weapon wielded by forces that predate the Erd tree. Forces that remember when the world was wild and free and wonderfully, terrifyingly alive. This is why the game feels so unsettling even in its moments of beauty. You're not just exploring a fantasy world, you're walking through the corpse of an older, stranger reality, one where different rules applied, where different powers held sway. The greater will has built its golden kingdom on the bones of its predecessors, but bones have a way of working their way to the surface. Every grace you follow, every blessing you receive, every level you gain is pulling you deeper into the greater will's web. It's not helping you become stronger. It's making you more useful, more compliant, more willing to serve its agenda without question. The Tarnished aren't heroes. They're antibodies designed to eliminate threats to the established order. But here's the thing about antibodies. Sometimes they turn against their host. Sometimes they recognize that the disease they're fighting is actually the cure. Sometimes they realize that the body they're protecting is the real sickness. The multiple endings of Elden Ring aren't just different ways to conclude the story, they're different choices about which god you'll serve, which vision of reality you'll help impose on the world. Do you restore the Golden Order, ensuring the greater will's continued dominance? Do you embrace the Frenzied Flame, burning away all distinction in a final act of cosmic rebellion? Do you choose the path of the stars, serving powers that exist beyond the boundaries of the lands between? Each choice carries consequences that ripple far beyond the immediate story. Each represents a fundamental decision about what kind of universe you want to live in. Order or chaos, structure or freedom, the familiar tyranny of the known or the terrifying promise of the unknown. And that's just the beginning. Because once you understand the true nature of these cosmic forces, once you see how they've shaped every aspect of the world you've been exploring, you start to notice things. Patterns, connections, signs that point toward truths the game never explicitly states but desperately wants you to discover. The real story of Elden Ring isn't about demigods or shattered rings or the ambitions of mortal rulers. It's about the war between incompatible visions of reality, fought across eons by beings whose very existence challenges our understanding of what gods can be. The god of scarlet rot pulses beneath Caelid's crimson wasteland, its influence seeping through every blade of corrupted grass, every twisted tree, every creature driven mad by its touch. This isn't Malenia's curse. This is something far older, far more primal. The goddess of rot existed long before the first Empyrean was born, long before the Erd tree cast its first shadow across the lands between. Her name was erased from history, her shrines buried beneath golden roots, her followers scattered to the winds. But rot cannot be killed. It can only be contained, suppressed, forgotten. And forgotten things have a way of returning when the world grows weak. The kindred of rot, those writhing insectoid creatures that plague the southern reaches, aren't abominations. They're the last faithful, the final remnants of a civilization that understood decay as a form of renewal. They worship through putrefaction, finding holiness in the breaking down of barriers, the dissolution of artificial boundaries. When Malenia bloomed in Caelid, she wasn't succumbing to corruption. She was channeling something ancient, something that predates the very concept of corruption. The scarlet rot isn't a disease. It's a philosophy made manifest, a rejection of the greater will's sterile perfection in favor of something messier, more honest, more alive. But rot is just one of many forgotten voices crying out from the depths of suppressed history. Deep beneath the eternal cities in chambers carved from living stone, another god stirs. The god of the silver tears, the formless one who taught the Nox the secrets of liquid life. This is why the eternal cities were banished beneath the earth. Not because they rebelled against the greater will, but because they remembered what came before it. They preserved the knowledge of malleable existence, of life that could shift and change and become anything it needed to be. The mimic tears aren't imitations, they're echoes of a time when identity was fluid, when form was suggestion rather than law. The Nox understood something the Golden Order desperately wants to forget. That consciousness isn't fixed, that the self is just another boundary to be transcended. Their silver tears could become anything, anyone, because they remembered when everything was connected, when the barriers between self and other were just another construct waiting to be dissolved. And then there's the god of the merchants, the one whose name was burned away along with their bodies in the depths beneath Leyndell. The Frenzied Flame didn't create the three fingers. It found them already formed by the suffering of those who died in darkness, crying out for a release that would never come. This god feeds on despair, on the moment when hope finally breaks and madness becomes the only rational response. Every merchant who wanders the roads alone, every soul who has lost everything and keeps walking anyway, carries a fragment of this forgotten divinity. They're not spreading goods. They're spreading a different kind of grace, one that acknowledges suffering as sacred, isolation as holy. The frenzy isn't chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a universe where connection has become impossible, where every attempt to reach out is met with violence, where the only honest response to existence is to burn it all down and start over. The merchants knew this. That's why they had to die. That's why their god had to be forgotten. But perhaps the most terrifying of all the forgotten gods is the one that never left. The god of the crucible, that primordial force that shaped life before the greater will imposed its rigid categories. This god didn't flee or die or get suppressed. It went underground, literally and figuratively becoming the foundation upon which the Erd tree grows. Every aspect of the crucible that survives is labeled as devolution, as regression, as something to be ashamed of. The horns, the wings, the scales, the feathers. All the beautiful, chaotic expressions of life's infinite potential reduced to curses and stigmas. The Omen are imprisoned not because they're dangerous, but because they remember what the world was like before the greater will sanitized it. The Crucible Knights serve this ancient god even now, their armor growing from their bodies, their weapons becoming extensions of their will. They're not knights in the traditional sense, they're priests. Guardians of a temple that exists in the spaces between heartbeats and the moments when the Golden Order's attention wavers. This is why Morgott is so tragic. He serves the Erd tree that despises his very existence, defends the order that brands him as cursed, fights to preserve a system that would erase him if it could. He's forgotten that his horns aren't a mark of shame. They're a crown, a reminder of royalty that predates any earthly throne. The god of the crucible whispers through every hybrid creature, every impossible combination of forms that shouldn't exist but does, the leonine misbegotten, the crucible aspects, the very concept of transformation itself. This god doesn't create, it reveals. It shows you what you could become if you stopped limiting yourself to what you think you are. And in the deep places of the world where the roots of the Erd tree grow thick and strange, other gods wait. The god of the claymen, those hollow sculptures that guard the eternal cities. The god of the ancestral spirits, those majestic beings that drift through the Siofra River like living memories. The god of the bloodhounds, those creatures that hunt not for sport but for worship, understanding violence as a form of prayer. Each represents a different way of being, a different relationship with existence itself. The claymen show us life without flesh, consciousness without biology. The ancestral spirits reveal the beauty of existence unbound by time, eternal and ever-changing. The bloodhounds demonstrate the sacred nature of the hunt, the holy communion between predator and prey. But why were these gods forgotten? Why did the greater will work so hard to erase them from history, to suppress their influence, to remake the world in its own image? The answer lies in the nature of order itself. Order cannot tolerate alternatives. It cannot allow other possibilities to exist because their very existence proves that the current system is arbitrary, changeable, ultimately unnecessary. The greater will didn't conquer the lands between. It colonized it. It imposed its alien logic on a world that operated according to different rules, different values, different understandings of what life could be. And like all colonizers, it rewrote history to make its dominance seem natural, inevitable, even beneficial. But the old gods didn't die. They adapted. They found new ways to express themselves, new vessels to carry their influence. The outer gods aren't external forces imposing their will on the world. They're the world itself trying to remember what it was before the greater will arrived to tell it what it should be. This is why the lands between feel so haunted. You're not just exploring a fantasy kingdom, you're walking through a graveyard of possibilities, a museum of abandoned futures. Every boss you fight, every area you explore, every item you collect is a fragment of a larger story, a piece of a puzzle that reveals the true scope of what's been lost. The greater will wants you to believe that its order is the only order, that its grace is the only grace, that its vision of reality is the only one that matters. But the forgotten gods know better. They remember when the world was wider, stranger, more alive, and they're waiting for someone brave enough to remember with them, and that's where you come in. As the Tarnished, you're not just playing a character in a story. You're making a choice about which version of reality will survive. Every grace you follow, every boss you defeat, every ending you pursue is a vote in a cosmic election that's been running for millennia. The beauty of Elden Ring isn't just in its gameplay or its world design. It's in the way it forces you to confront these impossible choices without ever explicitly telling you what they mean. Do you restore the Golden Order, ensuring that the Greater Will's sanitized version of existence continues forever? Do you embrace the Frenzied Flame, burning away all the artificial boundaries and returning everything to primordial unity? Or do you choose something else entirely, something that acknowledges the forgotten gods without fully understanding what that acknowledgement might cost? Because here's the thing about forgotten gods. They don't stay forgotten forever. They're patient. They're persistent. They understand that power built on suppression is ultimately fragile. That truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it's buried. The scarlet rot continues to spread. The death root keeps growing. The crucible aspects manifest in new forms. The silver tears remember their fluidity. The three fingers whisper their promises of release. These aren't bugs in the system, they're features, reminders that the world is far stranger and more wonderful than any single vision of order could contain. And you, as the Tarnished, as the player, as the one who chooses which story gets told, you have the power to decide what comes next. Will you be the Greater Will's antibody, eliminating threats to maintain stability? Will you be the Frenzied Flame's torch, burning away everything that causes suffering? Or will you be something else entirely, something that honors the forgotten gods without fully understanding what that honor might unleash? The choice is yours. It always has been. The gods, all of them forgotten and remembered alike, are waiting to see what you'll choose. The lands between hold their breath. The cosmic war continues, and somewhere in the spaces between thoughts, between heartbeats, between the falling of grace and the lighting of flame, the forgotten gods smile. Because they know something the greater will doesn't. Something the frenzied flame can't understand. Something that makes all the suffering, all the struggle, all the cosmic horror worth it. They know that in the end, existence itself is the victory. Not order, not chaos, not any single vision of what reality should be. Just the magnificent, terrifying, beautiful fact that anything exists at all. That consciousness arose from void, that meaning emerged from meaninglessness, that love found a way to flourish in a universe that should have been empty and cold. The forgotten gods of Elden Ring aren't just characters in a story. They're reminders of everything we've forgotten about ourselves, about the world, about the infinite possibilities that exist just beyond the edges of our vision. They're invitations to remember that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than any single perspective could contain, and that, more than any boss fight or plot twist or hidden secret, is what makes Elden Ring truly unforgettable. It's a game that dares to ask the biggest questions of all. What does it mean to exist? What price are we willing to pay for order? What beauty might we find in chaos? And what gods might we become if we're brave enough to remember who we really are? The lands between are waiting. The forgotten gods are calling, and you, Tarnished, you have the power to choose which story gets told next. Choose wisely, choose bravely, choose knowing that whatever you choose, the gods will remember. All of them. Forever.